Hey everybody, HomeSliceHenry here, and in today's video, I'm taking you to the Master League, where I'm going to be showcasing what is, in my opinion, the most improved Pokemon in the entire format, and that is Xerneas. Xerneas' Legacy Fast Move Geomancy got a monster buff this season. Normally, when fast moves get buffed, they get maybe 1 or 2 extra damage. Geomancy goes from 4 base damage all the way up to 8, quite literally doubling its damage. This makes Xerneas way more convincing into those dragon matchups like Palkia and Zygarde. And while it does still struggle against Zacian, that's why I'm pairing it up with Rhyperior. So without further ado, let's hop into the matches, and we're off to a strong start in game number 1, Rhyperior into Eternatus. Opponent is going to save switch into Zygarde, and now it's time, in comes Xerneas. It is immediately apparent the fact that this season Xerneas is actually dealing fast move damage. Zygarde is monstrously bulky in the Master League, but with this new fast move pressure on Xerneas, Xerneas should be able to land a Moonblast and then fully farm down. That's not something it was ever able to do previously. The nice thing as well is 2 Earthquakes will not be KOing the bulky Xerneas. Opponent realizes they do not want to concede that farm down, so they pivot out and send in Eternatus. I fire off the Moonblast to burn my switch timer and send in Rhyperior. While Rhyperior does survive the Dynamax cannon, I want to just go for a 1-shield farm down. That way I exit absolutely loaded on energy, and I'm still very healthy as well. My opponent cannot afford to bring back in the Zygarde. If they do, I'm just mud slapping it down. They reveal their final Pokemon is Zacian. Even though I'm running Superpower, I don't want to debuff my attack and defense just yet, so I go for the Rock Wrecker. They call that it's just a Rock Wrecker, but because I'm still at full attack and defense, I'm outputting some pretty massive damage onto the Zacian. Zacian knows they're in trouble. In comes Zygarde. Zygarde gets farmed down, and Rhyperior just absolutely took over this endgame. Xerneas being able to handle the Zygarde safe switch so nicely set up Rhyperior, and then Rhyperior just went on an absolute rampage. Great lead in the next match, Rhyperior into Zacian. That was one thing that I was noticing about the Master League. There are so many teams that are weak to Mud Slap. Unfortunately, I don't have a good Shadow Rhyperior, otherwise I would definitely be running the Shadow, but even the regular still put in some pretty nice work. It feels like a little bit of deja vu in game number 2. Granted, it was a different lead, but again a Zygarde safe switch, and it's going to be absolutely manhandled by Xerneas. Xerneas going to take 2 Earthquakes, and this time we get to take a look at this farm down. Look at this, Xerneas. No, the opponent tries for a snipe. They again do not let that farm down happen, but I make it close combat, and that does do some pretty sizable damage. Rhyperior hits the field, and it's just going to go for another one of its famous 1-shield farm downs. Opponent fires off the Behemoth Blade, but Mud Slap is undeniable, and down goes Zacian. In comes Palkia, and I have 100 energy on this Rhyperior. Rhyperior fires off the Rock Wrecker. That's going to be shielded up by my opponent, and I'm going to be immediately firing off Rock Wrecker number 2. This Rock Wrecker is going to be shielded as well, and I'm going to stay in to force them to throw. But they don't throw, and I'm actually able to make a Superpower. This will be getting the Palkia pretty low. Superpower is going to land. I switch in the Zacian, but realistically, I should not have stayed in with the Rhyperior after I Superpowered. That was a misplay, because I wasn't really getting a lot of damage, I was debuffed, and it just gave them more of an energy head start. And anytime you give a Palkia an energy head start, things can get a little bit scary. As they're already at their 3rd Aqua Tail, that's going to be getting me very low. I get the close combat, they make a catch onto Zygarde. Nice catch from my opponent, I was very, very low. Switch timer's up, so I send in Rhyperior. Down goes Rhyperior, Zacian gets the Metal Claw farm down, and we're able to take the win. Tricky lead in the next match, leading Rhyperior into an opposing Xerneas. Xerneas is able to outpace Rhyperior, and close combat is going to hit for monster damage. So I put up the shield, and my opponent does actually decide to full send. That's very, very nice. Now I can fire back with the Rock Wrecker and get the shield. Because they're debuffed, my Mud Slaps are actually doing very real damage. My opponent tries to CMP tie once again, but I have no intention of throwing. Instead, what I want to do is actually catch close combat onto my own Xerneas. This way I can save Rhyperior energy for later. Close combat not going to do much. In comes Lunala. Lunala is a Pokemon that did get buffed this season as well, as Shadow Ball now being cheaper is a big buff to that mon. Unfortunately, I don't have a good IV Lunala. I did do the raid, so I have the XLs for it, but I'm going to need to do more lucky trades because I still do not have a good IV. Shadow Ball will take the knockout. In comes Zacian, and I'm trusting in the fact that Rhyperior energy will be good in the back. My worry is if I try and CMP tie, my opponent will catch, so I predict the catch, but they just stay on the field and throw the Shadow Ball. So a miscalculation for me. In comes Rhyperior. Rhyperior will be able to take the knockout with the Rock Wrecker. It all comes down to what is in the back. Rock Wrecker takes the KO. In the back is Reshiram, and unfortunately Reshiram is about to get absolutely blasted by a Rock Wrecker. Rock Wrecker lands, Xerneas gets farmed down by Mudslap. In comes Reshiram. Reshiram gets farmed down as well, and that's a good game. Oh my goodness, Reshiram back for more in the next match, leading into Rhyperior, and they're staying in. Xerneas was incredibly good for me today, but you know what I'll say? Rhyperior was equally as good. So many teams just disrespect Rhyperior as a Pokemon, and that means that Rhyperior really felt kind of invincible on the lead. I think I only lost 2 leads over the course of 10 battles, and that's just because Rhyperior is just so consistent. My opponent sent in a Palkia, so I'm more than happy to just pivot into Zacian. They eventually bank energy and send in a Metagross, but they're so far behind on energy that Metagross is going to get absolutely rocked by close combat after close combat. Close combat number 2 is going to be no shielded. Down goes Metagross, and I can send in the Xerneas. And Xerneas into Palkia. Previously, Palkia could kind of flip this matchup, but with this extra damage, look at the fast move pressure. Xerneas is actually able to farm something down. Palkia goes for Aqua Tail after Aqua Tail. These Geomancies adding up more and more. And you know what? I want to go for the 2-shield flex. I can shield farm down with Xerneas, take the win, but I haven't used my shields. My opponent hasn't used their shields either, and I think that's a pretty funny way to end the game. Bad lead in the next match, Rhyperior into Zygarde, and I actually think I have to correct myself. I forgot that I led into a few Zygardes, so I think I probably lost 3 to 4 leads out of the 10 rather than 2, but overall, Rhyperior was winning the majority of leads. This Zygarde's moveset did leave me a little bit confused. Bulldoze works really well with old Dragon Tail, which was a lot more damage focused. With new Dragon Tail being energy focused, I do think that Outrage Earthquake makes a lot more sense, just because in the Master League, everything is so bulky. Like 2 Bulldozes is not a problem. That's super effective damage, and Zacian just does not care. Behemoth Blade lands, taking the knockout, and down goes Zygarde. My opponent's going to be sending in Zacian. Zacian's going to look for a big farm down. Here, I definitely should have gone for the close combat, because that way, at the very least, they would have got slightly less farm, but instead I go for the Behemoth, and that is a bit of a problem. In comes Rhyperior. Rhyperior has to be shielding everything, as Behemoth Blade and close combat would both be deadly. So I do put up the shield. My opponent tries to CMP tie to the Rock Wrecker, but I'm more than happy just to take the free Mud Slap. Close combat comes through. In the back is Palkia. I bank energy and I send in the Xerneas. And again, look at the Geomancies go. Xerneas actually feels like a real fairy-type Pokemon now, which is incredibly nice. They'll fire off another Aqua Tail, and I'm more than happy to take this damage because Xerneas can hang on, and now I will immediately undertap this close combat. Close combat will do devastating damage to the Palkia. Palkia puts up the shield. They CMP tie, but at this point, there's just no way out for the Palkia because of all that energy that I stored on Rhyperior. In comes Rhyperior, immediately firing off the Rock Wrecker. Palkia, they cannot survive. Back in comes the Zacian, and Zacian will get knocked out with the superpower. So, a bit of a moveset change from previous seasons where Breaking Swipe was preferred, but post-Breaking Swipe rework, I do think superpower is going to be preferred. We see a rare bad lead in the next match, leading Rhyperior into Kyogre. Save switching Zacian, typically not advisable, but if they're leading Kyogre, they cannot have Ho-Oh in the back because then they would be ABA weak to Palkia. So to me, it felt like a pretty safe gamble, and it ends up paying off, as they don't have an answer to Zacian and they're forced to stay in. Close combat gets the shield. Close combat number 2 will deal some pretty big damage or get the final shield. They no shield, they're now very low, and this works out great. In comes Xerneas, they're going to be pivoting, sending in Zamazenta. This is an Ice Fang Zamazenta. I'll fire off this close combat, and then look for farm with Rhyperior. In comes Rhyperior. Rhyperior, my goodness, these Mud Slaps are shredding through Zamazenta. Zamazenta, close combat, will be shielded. Rhyperior gets the farm down. I know the Kyogre is very, very low. I'm now, honestly, in a pretty okay spot. When they bring in the Kyogre, I'm going to be firing off the Rock Wrecker. I just want this Kyogre gone. Kyogre is going to be shielding up the Rock Wrecker. They send in Dialga. They realized it had nowhere to run. So even though Kyogre is very safe into my team, I was just triple strong into the Dialga. So Dialga just couldn't really do anything in this game. They end up getting Mud Slapped down. In comes Kyogre. Kyogre is going to be Geomancy down by Xerneas, and we take the win. Zygarde lead returns in the next match. This time I decided to throw one Mud Slap and then safe switch into Zacian. I'm more than happy to be hit by an Earthquake here because Earthquake does not one-shot and they have no fast move pressure, but again, it's another Bulldozer. Bit odd, but they're going to send in Lunala. Lunala really does not appreciate Behemoth Blade. This hits way too hard. Behemoth Blade is going to be shielded. I'm able to make it to a second Behemoth Blade as my opponent has a rather tragic miscount, and they played to a CMP tie that they do not win. And this, to me, just looks like an insane farm down for Xerneas, because Xerneas will very happily trade a shield in exchange for a big energy head start. So the shield comes up, as Lunala will fire off the Shadow Ball, but Xerneas, at the cost of basically no HP, gets an entire free Moonblast's worth of energy. In the back is Lugia, and this game is just a win. Xerneas will be able to sweep. Both Lugia and Zygarde really do not appreciate having to deal with Xerneas. It looks like my opponent may have just closed out of the app. Well, I kept this battle in just so we can see in real time the fact that Geomancy actually does fast move damage to a bulky Lugia as well. I'll fire off another Moonblast, farm down. Obviously, the moves are going to take quite a bit of time because they did close the app. Oh, it looks like they got back in the app for a second, but I mean, that game was over anyway, and they will finally resign the match. Back to better leads in the next match, Rhyperior into Zacian. My opponent safe switches into a Kyurem White, and I stay in with the Rhyperior to launch a Superpower. Superpower is going to do some very nice damage onto the Kyurem, and now I send in Xerneas. Xerneas will be able to survive any one charge attack from this Kyurem, so I'm going to be no shielding. Kyurem full sends the Ice Burn, and that is devastating damage. I do not want them to make a Fusion Flare, so I'm just going to go for the Close Combat. Close Combat lands, and I'm able to secure the KO. Back in comes Zacian, able to get the farm down. They do get a bit of an energy head start, but I'm going to get to bring back in the Rhyperior. Rhyperior being up a shield is very, very nice. My opponent has Palkia in the back as their final Pokemon. So I bank energy on the Rhyperior, send in the Zacian, and we should be in a pretty good spot to close out this game. The one downside about being Zacian in a Palkia matchup is the fact that you don't really have a lot of fast move pressure. So unless I land a close combat, the Zacian's health bar isn't really decreasing. I will fire off another close combat here. That's going to be shielded up by the Palkia. They undertap, and I'm just going to close this out with the Rhyperior. So Rhyperior is going to have 2 shields, and it's going to need them because in comes the Zacian, and suddenly I realize I may have miscalculated. I've taken quite a bit of damage on the Rhyperior throughout the course of the game. I am suddenly very, very low. I can't afford to superpower because if I do, then my Rock Wrecker might not knock out. So I build up to the back-to-back Rock Wreckers. They survive on 1 HP, and now I need the Rock Wrecker to KO. I should have just shielded the Zacian and I would have been fine. Rock Wrecker lands, Palkia with the 1 HP survive. That game was super winnable, but unfortunately, I saved 2 shields for a Rhyperior that didn't have enough HP, and that ends up costing me the win. We move to the next match, Rhyperior leading into a Zacian once again. They go for the close combat, and they're going to be dipping and sending in Kyurem. I'm going to be full sending Rock Wrecker at this Kyurem. Rock Wrecker is going to be shielded, and now I'm going to bring in my own Zacian. I know that Fusion Flare will hit for big super effective damage here, but the important thing is I do survive a Fusion Flare from full. So I'm able to hang on, undertap the close combat, and prevent my opponent from getting that second Fusion Flare unless they're wanting to put up a shield. And it looks like they do. They are going to be shielding, and I decide to shield back because switch advantage is pretty nice. If at all possible, I do want to try and keep my Xerneas away from Zacian, as that's really the matchup that Xerneas does not want to deal with. Close combat takes the knockout. My opponent is going to be getting farm on Zacian, and this could get quite tricky, as Rhyperior is going to get outpaced, and now I have to hope that my opponent blind switches into their final Pokemon. If they stay on the field, this could get tricky, but they blind switch into a Zekrom, and that's going to be a win. Xerneas will be able to close out this game very, very comfortably. Zekrom launches Fusion Bolt that does some pretty sizable damage, but I can farm up to the back-to-back close combat. I don't know if close combat would have knocked out here, but I'll go for the Moonblast to guarantee it, and I will be able to outpace the Zacian. If Zacian hadn't been blind switching into the Zekrom there and stayed in, could have been a bit of a tricky game where I would have had to close combat and then be debuffed for the Zekrom matchup, but they ended up switching out, so we're able to take the win. Hopping into the final match, and what do you know, it's Rhyperior winning another lead, as it's going to be the Zacian once again. I did see fewer Palkia, which was cool to see. Obviously a lot of Zacian, but man, Rhyperior was absolutely feasting today. Superpower from this Rhyperior will take the knockout, and we win the lead. In comes Reshiram, and if they're sending in a Reshiram, that means they are triple weak to Rhyperior. Therefore, I kind of want to save it. So I'm just going to pivot into the Xerneas. Xerneas farming up energy. Opponent tries to go for the CMP tie, but I'm more than happy just to take the free Geomancy. Fusion Flare is going to land. I go for the Moonblast, and my goodness, Reshiram's new pacing with the Dragon Breath is very, very fast. I really didn't play Master League last season, so I'm kind of getting used to all this new Dragon Breath pacing. Moonblast is going to be getting them very low, and in the back, they have Zekrom. Even a close combat will be very threatened to Zekrom, so I'm just going to fire this off right away. Zekrom puts up the shield, and in comes Zacian. Zacian farming up. My opponent should reach the back-to-back Fusion Bolts here, if I'm not mistaken, but Fusion Bolt not going to be enough. We survived that very comfortably, and now I get to lock in some critical damage with Close Combat. Close Combat lands, they're just too low. They can never get the double up that they need. Opponent sees the writing on the wall and concedes the match. And here I am hitting rank 20, and for my elo, we're sitting at 2371. And now some final thoughts on the buff to Xerneas and this new adjusted Master League meta. After a few sets of playing this Master League meta, honestly, I do prefer it quite a bit to last season's meta. I do think having Pokemon like Xerneas be stronger helps reduce the influence of Palkia just a little bit, and overall, I think that is a big plus. One meta trend that I was really noticing in this new Master League is there are so many teams that are ABA weak to Mudslap, or even triple weak to Rhyperior. People are not really respecting Rhyperior when it comes to team building, and that's fair, because Rhyperior, obviously it was once the best Master League Pokemon, but with the rework to Breaking Swipe, which I would argue was a pretty significant nerf, it made Rhyperior a lot more difficult to use. But I do think that Rhyperior, just purely based on the fact that people are disrespecting with their team building, is honestly a really smart bring right now. I mentioned it earlier, I don't have a Shadow Rhyperior. If I had a Shadow Rhyperior, you could very easily run Shadow Rhyperior on this team, and it would probably be better than the version that I was running. I just don't have a very good IV one. I think the best I've ever gotten was like a 13 attack, and none of the stats were at 15, so I didn't end up building it whatsoever. But man, this new Master League did feel quite a bit more fun than previous versions. I do like the fact that Palkia's influence has been checked just a little bit. I don't think the Spatial Rend nerf did anything, but I think buffs to Pokemon like Xerneas does make Palkia a slightly more difficult bring, and overall, I think that is a big plus. Now, before I play Master League again, I really need to do more lucky trades, because Lunala seems to be a strong neutral presence. And Lunala, one of the big downsides for it was the fact that with that Dragon Breath rework, suddenly the Palkia matchup was really, really bad. Well, if Palkia is going to be slightly less common, then hopefully Lunala will have a chance to shine as an incredibly neutral, flexible Pokemon. As the Lunala matchup into Zacian can actually, it's pretty balanced. It can kind of go either way. So I do hope to try and get a Master League Lunala so I can test that out as well, because that seems like a pretty fun pick. But overall, for a first few sets in a new Master League meta, after I really didn't like the last season's Master League meta, I would say so far, so good. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. If you're enjoying the content, make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't. And an extra special thank you, as always, to our channel members here on YouTube. The support you guys provide is sincerely appreciated. So thank you guys oh so very much. And until next time, I've been HomeSliceHenry.